Hi, everyone. Welcome. So I see that we've got some folks here already. We're going to get going in just a moment, but while we're waiting for the rest of our attendees to sort of land in this virtual space, why don't we all sort of hop in the chat? So make sure that you select to everyone, because if you just send it to the host and the panelists, only myself and my colleague will see it. But if you select to everyone, I'd love to know where you're from, region, school, org. I'm really curious to know who's here and where y'all are from. Welcome. Welcome, Montana. New York City, New Brunswick. Hey, some good grief facilitators. Hello. Texas. Lots in New Jersey. Oh, did I see Ronald McDonald House? Yes, we've partnered with your Eastern North Carolina chapter. I think we'll be doing some work with you nationally next month. Oh, Canada, Argentina, Florida. This is fun. This is a fun group.
I'm recognizing a lot of names in this chat as well. So thank you, folks.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for showing up. Ohio. Yeah. More Florida. Florida. I will be visiting you next week. So hopefully it's warmer and sunnier than it is here in New Jersey right now. It is a rainy, cloudy, and I think in some parts of the state, maybe even snowy day. So we're having a time here. But enough about the weather. I just want to welcome you all here. Thanks for indulging me by hopping in the chat. My name is Evelyn Moon. I'm Director of Education here at Good Grief, and I am so grateful for the opportunity to spend this time with you all today. I just want to send immense gratitude to you all for just, carving out a piece of your day, because you're coming from all over, all different times. I'm sure you were doing something before you got here. You have somewhere to go after. So just your presence, your attention today. So grateful. And I'm also grateful for my wonderful co-presenter. So today's session is part of our Good Grief Schools webinar series. So every school year, we bring you content, experts, information, advocacy. It's all just part of our effort to extend the work that we do in our centers here at Good Grief and push out into the virtual space. So this session is being recorded, so no worries if you want to revisit parts of it. It will live forevermore on our YouTube channel once we get the recording up. And everyone who's attending live today will receive a certificate of attendance within the next 48 hours. That'll come to you via email. You'll be able to click and type in your own name, and it's just our way of acknowledging your time with us today and appreciating you. So we are from Good Grief. I know there's many of you who are very familiar with us, but for those of you who are not, we are a nonprofit organization. We have been around in New Jersey since 2004, and this is our mission. Our mission is to build resilience in children, strengthen families, and empower communities to grow from loss and adversity. So for most of our org's history, we have been providing completely free and unlimited peer support programming, and we do that in our two centers, one in Morristown, one in Princeton. We're also still doing virtual groups as well. That started during COVID and has continued even to this day. And we like to say that we go from 3 to 30 with our kids. So from the little guys all the way through young adulthood, but also supporting the parents and the caregivers in the home as well. And in recent years, our work has been expanding. We want to bring our education, our advocacy, our materials into the hands of the people that can really utilize it to build resilience and support grievers in their communities. So that's schools, hospitals and healthcare settings, corporations, funeral industry, really anywhere where we can empower others with the knowledge, the tools, and the lenses to be supportive for themselves and for others. Oh, the chat's still going. Hi, friends. Hello. People from all over. So I just wanted to provide you all with a big picture view of the work that we do before we dive into our topic today. So we have our family support services. That is our nights of support that we run through our two centers. Those happen from September through June, every other week in the evenings. We have Good Grief Schools. So we have a grief support curriculum that we essentially do a train the trainer. We empower schools to then run the curriculum within their own buildings for grief support, resilience building. We have summer camp, so that is coming this summer. I know a lot of things are underway for that as well. Last month, we had back in person again our Good Grief Spring Institutes. That's our in-person PD event for our own facilitators, but also for the broader community. So this year, we focused on adverse childhood experiences. We'll be announcing very soon what we're looking forward to in 2023. I know it sounds really far away, but we are planning it already. It is coming, friends. We do all kinds of PD and training, parent and caregiver education, and we have a youth and funerals initiative. So our presenters, surprise, one is me. As I said, I am Evelyn Moon, and I have the honor of being a part of the team that prepares our volunteer facilitators to run our nights of support. I also present to external audiences, like I said, like schools, corporations, hospitals, funeral homes. But the bulk of my time is really spent with Good Grief schools. So if you ever want to learn more about our school programming, I'm always happy to connect. We'll be sharing our contact info at the end of this session. And let me introduce my colleague here.
Hi, everyone. So first off, I wanted to kind of start off with gratitude and echo Evelyn. We are so happy to be able to have this experience. My name is Alyssa Paccioni, and not only am I a guest speaker for Good Grief Schools webinar series, but also I'm a staff member. My role here is the Family Services Manager for our Princeton Center. And of course, I'm joined by Evelyn Moon, who's my friend and colleague from the education department. So we are the Princeton girls, are 2 out of 3 of the Princeton girls. And I'm really excited to, work with her, and, much gratitude to her for making this happen and opening the door for collaboration between departments. And shout out to Sue, yes. Wait, thank you to the audience as well. So in terms of my professional background, I received my master's in clinical mental health counseling from FDU in 2020. From that, I obtained my license for associate counseling, or LAC. That's the acronym after my name, in the state of New Jersey. So I am a professional counselor, and I've worked extensively with children and teens within a mental health context. So the journey of this presentation, this also has a story. And it was originally inspired by a concept from my therapist that she introduced me to, and it was really life-changing. I was like, wow, this lady's really smart. I've never thought of this. And come to find out, this is a, empirically researched, concept to assist folks who are, working with individual counselors. So I don't owe her any royalties for this presentation, but I do want to kind of highlight that this was a really big topic that she inspired. As part of my professional development, so the original development of this presentation, I developed this within a career counseling context, which may also be on YouTube, so you might be able to find the original presentation. But Evelyn and I had the opportunity to reimagine this concept within a more grief-informed lens, thanks to what Good Grief already provides. So really, without further ado, let's jump in and take a look at our learning goals. So in this workshop, we will define ants and the way that they show up in our lives, share strategies for navigating ants and managing their presence and impact, and explore best practices for individuals in helper roles to support others and themselves. So of course, we're looking at this more within the helper role, assisting a grieving child who has lost a parent or sibling. So really the purpose of this webinar is not to banish every negative or judgmental thought from your head. We recognize we're human, and judgmental thoughts are bound to show up, from time again. So what we aim to do today is really raise our awareness to our ants and know what to do with them when they come up. So I'm going to pass it back to Evelyn for something that we do here at Good Grief before really any for anything.
Yeah.
So Evelyn, take it away.
So before we dive in, and something you should know about Good Grief is that we are big on what we call ritual. And you're probably familiar with rituals in your own work, but to us, rituals are a way of checking in with ourselves, checking in with others. They're also a way to manage transitions. Like I said before, we're all coming from somewhere. We're all probably hurrying off to something after this one. And we also know that rituals like a check-in can help ground us in the present moment and break a little ice. And we're going to do something called a waterfall chat using the prompt on this slide. And the way a waterfall chat works is that I will give you a moment to consider your answer, to, in 3 words, describe how you're feeling today. So you can share 3 separate words like tired, wired, good, or you can turn it into a sentence like ready to go. But in that moment, I'm going to ask you not to press enter until I say so, because when I tell you to press enter, that will create the waterfall effect in the chat when we all kind of press it simultaneously. So again, think of 3 words. You can type them into the chat, but just wait until I say go to press your button. And I'll try to think of my words today too. I'll give it a moment. 3 words. It could be 3 separate words or a sentence. We'll see how everyone's arriving. We saw where everyone was arriving from all over. Well, let's see how you're all doing today. All right, so hopefully you've got it. And we're gonna all press enter in 3, 2, 1. Yeah, there it goes. Oh, it's still going. It's still going. So there's that sort of initial deluge, and they're all coming in. Yeah. Tired, excited, focused. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, so there's a whole range of how people are feeling right now. And feel free. I always say beg, borrow, steal. If that's a structure that you enjoy and you facilitate frequently with groups online, just a different way of, give us 3 words how you're arriving. Let's just have them type it. If you have a big group, it'll really start going. You're trying to scan it all. But it's just great to get a temperature check, see how people are doing, and let us all kind of land in this space together today.
Right. So again, thank you so much, guys, for participating in our ritual. So now we'll kind of jump into our topic of the day and learn what exactly are ants. So ants is actually an acronym that stands for automatic negative thoughts, or self-defeating language that limits a person's ability to feel motivated, productive, or enjoy the day-to-day. So I'm going to ask to do a little visualization. Imagine your mind is a picnic basket and your thoughts are all that good stuff inside. Really, the main idea that we're looking at is the more negative or judgmental influence on our thoughts, the more ants are attracted. So really how one thinks on a moment-to-moment basis plays a large role in the way we feel. And we see that a lot, right? Our thoughts influence behavior. So going back to really normalizing the presence of those negative or judgmental thoughts that we might have about ourselves, you may have 1 or 2 naturally. However, it becomes a real big problem when the ants tend to invite their friends to your subconscious picnic. So ants could be really unwanted, unhelpful, and more importantly, believable. So they're really not going to be any help to you when you are in that helper role to support a grieving child. And we talk about this a lot in our training here at Good Grief is you can't pour from an empty cup. So really making sure we develop this awareness of our ants. And again, what to do when they pop up. So again, I'm going to throw it back to Evelyn, who's going to talk a little bit more about the helper role and what that may look like within a grief context.
Yes. So I'd like to say, I know my colleagues have heard me say this probably a million times, but I like to begin at the beginning. And since this webinar is geared towards folks in helper roles, we thought it would be helpful to define what a helper role actually is. And spoiler alert, it's pretty much all of you here today. So helpers are volunteer facilitators, educators, counselors, parents, caregivers, really any caring adult who is invested in supporting a grieving child, but really any person, any other person who's going through some kind of loss, stress, or some kind of adversity. And being in a helper role, it's a choice. And it's one you've made just by caring enough to show up here today. I find that helpers are heart people at their core. And part of our mission is to equip you with the knowledge, the skills, and the tools to support others without burning yourself out. Compassion fatigue is real. It's something frequently experienced by those in helper roles, which I'm sure you've probably experienced firsthand in yourself or in interacting with other helpers. And our hope is that by participating in today's session, you feel empowered and you feel confident in addressing ants and young people, but also in ourselves in ways that are helpful and free of judgment and free of stress. So again, I just want to reinforce, we all experience ants as humans. It is completely normal. It is a universal experience, but we can all benefit from having the awareness and a few tools to deal with it.
All right, so now we're going to look into the many types of ants that may present themselves in our heads. So the first type that we'll kind of look at is all or nothing thinking. So thinking everything is either all good or all bad. It's often referred to as black and white thinking. So from a good grief context, often facilitators will bring up what makes a good night of support, nights of support being our main programming that supports grieving families. So something that we kind of encourage them to think about is there really such a thing? What are the participants gaining from this experience? So that's kind of on Good Grief's end about how those ants can get in the way of our really meaningful and amazing work that we do with our families. And I'm not sure, Evelyn, I know when we were developing this program, we also looked at it from, outside of Good Grief, because we have a lot of teachers, parents, and other folks from, different capacities. So there's other ways,
Oh, yeah. If any of you have interacted with a child, certain ages and stages are just way more black and white than others, just by default. So from a child's perspective, we see this here a lot as well. Even thinking back to my own daughter, like things are good until they aren't. We could be having the most amazing day ever. I'm talking going to a theme park and we had ice cream and then we had pizza and then we get home and it's like, it's time to take a bath. This is the worst day of my life. How quickly it can turn. Like, was it really all bad? What can we do to pull back and sort of look at the bigger picture and understand what the good parts are, rather than just living right in this present piece that maybe doesn't feel as good? So incredibly black and white with kids.
Mm-hmm. And also too, sometimes kids, they need that support to kind of see that bigger picture. Their brains haven't developed that abstract thinking. So it's really up to us to be that model and to help them through that, that process. So the next ant that we'll go over is focusing on the negative. So seeing the negative aspects in a situation, even when there's plenty of measurable positives. So again, going back to the good grief context, facilitators will often we'll hear feedback saying what went wrong first. So thinking about, well, what did you do in the night? How was the situation handled? And what did the participant gain from it? So sometimes it's really difficult to step back from that ego and assess really that judgment on ourselves and be like, oh man, like I wasn't able to do everything I set out to do on a night of support. We do encourage creative freedom with our activities that are pre-planned for our nights of support. So, kids, as Evelyn already said, they'll arrive and different types of feeling with different types of feelings, and it could change in a second. So really we encourage facilitators to stay flexible and really work with the group, meeting them where they're at. And again, I want to provide space to Evelyn for other examples that they may show up.
Yeah, I mean, just in sort of a workplace context, I guess this even happens in school, but how many of us have received the old feedback sandwich, the classic, there's something more critical or negative and it's wedged between two more positive pieces of feedback. And honestly, there could be multiple layers of delicious positive feedback. I'm picturing it like the slices of bread, like a Scooby-Doo sandwich on that sandwich. but we will still ignore those pieces of it and fixate on that one thing that maybe could have gone differently. So when we say that you're focusing on the negative, it's really, you kind of just get hooked on this one piece, you know. So we see it happen with kids, but we see it happen with adults too.
Absolutely. Um, I'm loving all the food metaphors we're throwing out. It's lunchtime. So
It's what happens when we schedule this at 12
yes.
Eastern Standard.
So the next ant is overgeneralized thinking. So thinking in words such as always, never, every time, or everyone. So a good grief example that comes up a lot. We'll hear facilitators say something along the lines of, Alyssa never speaks in group. So again, speaking from that place of judgment and evaluation, we're asking folks to look evaluation versus an observation. It takes work and intention to really step out of that and say, oh man, like I'm noticing like you haven't said, I'm noticing they didn't speak. But again, it's not because they don't want to or they're feeling resistant. It could be a lot of different things, and we have to stay out of that place of judgment and kind of observe what we're seeing. Alyssa didn't say anything during.
Yeah. And I
That's
would add, you know, staying out of judgment is a key piece of being an empathic presence for other people. So whenever you are supporting a griever or supporting someone, any person who is in pain, you know, of course, you want to be that empathic presence. That is difficult to do if you are sort of approaching it with this overgeneralized thinking through that lens of judgment and evaluation versus a place of observation.
absolutely. So the next is thinking with our feelings. So having a feeling or an afterthought about something, assume it's correct and never question it. So our feelings can lie too. Look for evidence. Thoughts are really different from our feelings. Some have more awareness than others. So
Oops,
really,
sorry.
um, so really, our feelings are influencing what could possibly be a different perspective that what's actually happening in reality. So it kind of warps your perception in a way. And Evelyn, I'm wondering if there's anything else you have to add to that.
No, I mean, I think that's the big takeaway. You know, thoughts are different from feelings. So you really have to take a moment to examine it. You know, it's all about having that awareness because it can be easy to believe those sometimes.
Absolutely. The next one is guilt beating, and this is my personal favorite because it brings in a very key person in counseling, Albert Ellis. So guilt beating is thinking in words like should, must, ought to, and have to. So Albert Ellis coined the phrase, stop shoulding on yourself. So something to kind of bring back to good grief is I should have done the night of support activity differently. Be gentle with yourself. Look for learning opportunities rather than succumbing to, that judgmental thoughts on your performance, and that's something that we model and provide to our facilitators all the time. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later on in the presentation. But at our nights of support, in order to provide kind of a debriefing for our facilitators, we have something called pre and post group where facilitators can kind of process these frustration, these ants, and receive that kind of positive feedback or feedback from their peers. So again, we'll kind of talk a little bit more about how that's present later on. But again, it's a learning experience. We do that for our Spring Institute, introducing new content every year. And we are always adapting and learning in order to support our participants. And again, Evelyn, anything else to add for guilt beating?
I just laughed at the stop shoulding on yourself because it's so true. I mean, how often do we judge ourselves and guilt ourselves for our own growing edges? And I think kids easily default to this as well. You know, I should have done this. I have to do that. It must be like this. And again, it's just look for those opportunities to learn. we all have our growing edges, no matter what our profession is, no matter what it is that we're trying to get better at. I find with most things, you don't hit the pinnacle and you go, all right, now I'm done. I'm done learning. We just have to be kind to ourselves.
Absolutely. And the final one here is labeling. So using judgmental terms to describe yourself and others. So you're telling yourself a story with the information you have, whether it's, completely accurate or not. So the more you invite these judgmental and negative thoughts, the more it feels true. So again, this is your truth and your reality, how you're perceiving a certain situation. Kind of going back to that participant who was really quiet in group. Alyssa never talks in group. Is that true? So we're already kind of in April, deep into our program here at Good Grief. So thinking back to the other groups that you've had starting since September, is that really true? Has she really said nothing? So that's kind of where labeling can come into play and, really inhibit your ability to stay non-judgmental and supportive of our kids. And again, Evelyn, anything else to add?
Yeah, I think it's again just being aware of the stories you tell yourself, either about yourself or about others, because with these automatic negative thoughts, the more they pop up, because the thing about these is these all feel kind of like possible and real. The automatic negative thoughts tend not to be too outlandish, but the more you reinforce the thought, I think the more power and sort of realness it can start to gain.
Absolutely. So now we went over kind of the general ants that show up. Now we'll go over the red ants, which are really detrimental to our relationships and our abilities in the helping role. So altogether, there are 9 ants. We just reviewed the first 6. These 3 are the really big ones to look out for. The first one is fortune telling. So predicting the worst will happen even though you don't know it will happen yet. So something that could come up for an individual supporting a grieving child. I know something bad will happen if I say the wrong thing to a grieving child. Often we'll avoid the uncomfortable in situations because of the thought it'll all go wrong. So if I don't do it, nothing bad could possibly happen, right? But then, on the flip side, that child's still not getting that support. And that's really the main goal that we're trying to provide to our families here at Good Grief. And again, throwing it to Evelyn to see, how it can present other aspects outside of Good Grief.
Yeah, I think the funny thing about fortune telling is it gets in the way of possibilities because you've told yourself that you already know what's going to happen. I mean, you'd be surprised if you actually try. It might not actually be as hard or as horrible as you've predicted it to be because you're really defaulting to the worst. And that sort of gives us almost permission to avoid something that maybe we should really be engaging with or leaning into.
Absolutely. The next is mind reading. So thinking that someone else is, what someone else is thinking, even though they haven't shared anything with you. So again, you're making assumptions about what someone else or how someone else may be feeling. So again, thinking back to that quiet kid in a night of support group, children still have eyes and ears, even if they're choosing not to share. They're still gaining something from the experience. And I tell this part of my role is meeting with our families who are interested in joining our Nights of Support program. And I kind of see the relief on our kids' faces when they come in for the first time. When I say, you have a choice on how you want to participate. You can either, and for little ones, use your ears and eyes to, listen to another participant's story. Or, if you want to, you can share your own and share with other kids your age. But again, it's up to them on that night, and it kind of gives them that control. And that's why we have Good Grief. So the child has control over their grief narrative. And just throwing it back to Evelyn for mind reading in other ways.
Yeah, I mean, mind reading is such a funny thing because it really is, you are making assumptions by leaps and bounds by convincing yourself that you believe that you know what someone else is thinking or feeling without asking them, without actually engaging with them. You've assumed a lot of things. And I know human beings are sort of hardwired to make a lot of different types of assumptions. But part of today's session is just to encourage you to raise your awareness of it, because we can break free of those cycles of making assumptions about what other people think, feel, or believe.
Mhm. And the final one is blame. This is the worst of all ants. So blame is blaming others for outside problems and taking no responsibility for your own successes and or failures. So it's really defeatist language that impedes autonomy and accountability over our actions. So from a good grief context, and this doesn't happen ever. I've never heard this in my experience, but just to kind of give an idea of how it might present in a good grief context on Night of Support, having a facilitator say something like, I'd be running the perfect group if it weren't for my co-facilitator. Our facilitators are volunteers. They're coming from really fantastic different backgrounds and experiences, and that brings a lot of diversity in our volunteer base. Of course, there's going to be those clashing personalities, but really it's part of that role as the facilitator to work with your co-facilitators, figure out a plan to kind of get to know your group members and see what the best possible way for having an activity on a given night. So it feels better to really blame something outside of yourself, which can always limit your accountability and your learning. So I do also want to, again, pass it back to Evelyn for that other perspective as well.
Yeah. And I think we've all either seen this in ourselves or we've seen this in others. And I think what's interesting is, like you said, it's that accountability. It's not taking responsibility, not only for what may be our perceived like failures or shortcomings, but also your own success. It completely blows away your ability to hold yourself accountable over your own actions, one way or the other, because everything is sort of happening outside of your control.
All right. So really, that's the reason why we created this webinar, to provide those adaptive skills to mitigate the effects of stress, especially with our kids. So together, that's really what we're doing, both with our families and with our facilitators, is together we're building resilience. So next, I'll throw it back to Evelyn with a really cool technological thing I have no idea how to do. So she has taken the lead on this one.
Hopefully this works. So I'm going to launch a poll, friends. So I just wanted to do a little bit of a temperature check and see, what ants do you recognize either in yourself or in the world around you? So we're talking about, whether we're talking about adults or kids, it's all very similar, and you can select more than one. I made sure to do it that way. So we'll give folks a moment to chime in, and then I will share the results. But yeah, like I said, whether we're talking about adults or kids, it is very similar when it comes to ants. For example, when we think about how humans react to stress, like the mental effects, the physical effects, the emotional effects, it's very similar for kids and adults. The difference being that adults tend to have just a little bit more life experience and healthy coping mechanisms in place than kids do, usually. Hate to overgeneralize here. And along that same vein, ants show up at every stage, every age, in similar ways, which is why our tips to support will have some cross application. So let me see, we've got about, okay, yeah, people are still chiming in, so I don't want to end it too soon. I'll give it another moment. All right, so let's see where we're at. I'm going to end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And let's share some results here. Yeah, it looks like all of them. There is maybe one that's a little bit ahead of the others. Labeling seems to not be as high. Yeah, really interesting stuff. So we see this really truly all around us, either in us or in the world around us.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Successful poll. We did it. Yeah. So like I said, our tips to support do have some that only 30% see or feel blame. Yeah, I mean, again, this was just a quick poll of of the folks who were actually able to hop on. So, certainly we know there's some folks who maybe are not able to get their hands on their computer right now, but it is interesting, right, Thomas, the ones that we sort of were immediately drawn to, as opposed to others.
And it sounds like there's been a lot of connection too. The fact that across the board there was that, oh yeah, I recognize that, I do that. And again, that awareness within your everyday life, kind of taking this content with you in your day to day. So yeah, it's something definitely to think about for sure.
Yeah. And speaking of awareness, for us, the first step really is awareness. Because the more awareness we have of ants that we have in our own lives, the more informed we are when we're helping a child who's possibly experiencing the same thing. So my hope is that these tips that Alyssa will take you through will help empower you to show up with empathy. You can identify and clearly communicate the emotions you're seeing in the other person, in the child, and help provide language, especially with kids, to name it.
Right. So the first thing we can do to manage our ants is to recognize it. And Evelyn already, did a good job of highlighting the importance of this first step, which is always awareness and identification. What is it? So a lot of folks, you guys did that already with our poll. I'm recognizing, wow, based on this description, I might do this, from time to time. So what's next is trap that bug. Take those thoughts from inside of us and make them tangible so that we can examine it. So how might that look? Write it down. Describe it. How are you feeling? Within your body. Where does it live? That's something that I've worked with my younger clients because when I was getting my hours for my licensure. I worked with between 7 to 9 years old as far as my client pool. And as Evelyn said, sometimes the kids don't have the language to describe what they're feeling. And it's much easier for them to recognize something in their body. So whether it's a stomach ache, maybe a pounding heart, a headache, where is it living and what does it look like? Also, what questions are we asking ourselves about when we experience an ant? A lot of these take cognitive reframing, which is our next one. So I'll hold off on explaining and going into more detail there. But really, this is kind of the process of like, okay, how can we start to reframe our thoughts? So recognize it. What is it? The next one, as I've already kind of explained, is reframe and release. So this is really where the squashing comes into play. Something that you may want to try is talking back to it. We've already looked at the ant and how it can really warp our perception. So how much truth is there really to an ant? And again, you've already started thinking about that when you recognize it, processing how it looks, how it comes up. What situations might trigger it. So reframing your ant into a learning opportunity in order to stay more motivated and try a new plan that might work better in your support. And again, that's something always bringing into our nights of support. If something doesn't work the first time, that's okay. What can we do to make it better for next time? So the main idea for reframe and release, challenge the thought. And we do this all the time. Again, I mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy, which recognizes the thought and kind of challenges that meaning that we've kind of automatically ascribed to it. So that is kind of step two when we are approached with an ant. And now I'll kind of throw it to Evelyn for our last two tips.
Right. So we've recognized it. We've said, oh, there's an ant. We've caught it in our jar. We've examined it. We've interrogated it. And we've reframed it and we've released it. So we've released the ant, released the thought. So what is the next step? If you recall earlier, I did mention compassion fatigue. And I think it is really easy for those of us in helper roles to carry the worries, the stories, and the burdens of others with us. And we have to work really intentionally to care for ourselves in order to be present for others. So it's just like on a plane, they tell you put on your own oxygen mask first before attempting to help others. And it can feel really counterintuitive when we want to help. But if that plane's going down, you are no good to anyone if you're unconscious on the floor. And Alyssa even said earlier that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. And that's related to the concept of self-care. And it is something that is so critical in order to be present for others, is to first be present for yourself. We like to think about self-care here at Good Grief under 4 main categories. There's the emotional, the intellectual, the physical, and the spiritual. And we say this because we really do feel like this represents sort of all the aspects of what it means to just be a human. When we get burdened, we get stressed, we feel overtaxed and overwhelmed, it will manifest in different ways within each of these 4 quadrants. So I hope you walk away from today with an awareness not only of the effects of grief, stress, adversity, and these automatic negative thoughts, but also thinking about even really small ways that you can show up for yourself to help manage your compassion fatigue. In order to make healthy choices and care for ourselves in times of stress, I found it's been really helpful to consider what self-care looks like for you when you aren't feeling overwhelmed. So that is my call to action for you all today. Like, yes, we're raising awareness around ants. We're talking about things that we can do to manage them in ourselves and help others who we're trying to support manage them, but also thinking about how to care for yourself, because self-awareness and self-care really do go hand in hand. Alyssa, did you want to talk about what self-care looks like at Good Grief?
Absolutely. So I mentioned earlier that we kind of have self-care for our facilitators or volunteers that are helping us on a night of support and running our groups. So this is called pre and post group. Its purpose really is to allow facilitators to arrive, and be present with their group, leave everything from their personal lives at the door, and be fully present within our groups on a night of support. After the night is over, so once everybody goes home and it's just our volunteers and staff left, we have something called post group where we kind of discuss and debrief about the night. As you can imagine, a lot of difficult stuff can come up. And these kids, they know that this is a safe place to really talk about what they might be experiencing. And they come with really heavy stories. As I've mentioned, these are volunteers. They've had some level of, professional, many come with some professional experience within a helping role, but that's not to say all of them do. So we want to make sure our volunteers are feeling, as supported and, feeling okay as our participants and families, because, our volunteers are also a huge part of what we do here, and we wouldn't be able to run nights of support without them. So it's really a responsibility on Good Grief's end to help them feel supported and taken care of.
Yeah. And just remember, helpers, parents, caregivers, all of the above, we tend to be more likely to sacrifice our own needs and put others ahead of ourselves. So just want to remind you, to take care of yourselves as well. And also want to encourage you to connect with resources. And you are making strides right now just by being here. Just by being present with us today, you are gaining skills in order to better prepare you to help a grieving child or really any other person, including yourself. And Good Grief has tons of free resources and advocacy that you can access right now online. If you go onto our website, we have tip sheets, videos, we have our YouTube channel. If you're looking for grief support that's local to you, because I saw in the chat, we had people from all over, the National Alliance for Children's Grief has a resource tab, which you can type in your zip code and it will bring up physical centers, camps, school programs, things that are near you. And I want to encourage you to really get familiar with all of the resources that are available in your community for you, but also for the people that you are serving in your helping role. Because I think we can never learn too much and we can never have too much support when it comes to supporting grievers, grieving families, and people who are facing some kind of loss stress and adversity.
Absolutely. And again, thank you so much for being here. You know, as Evelyn said, you are making strides right now by just participating with us. So again, offering that gratitude for just being here and being present with us today. And of course, you know, we have a closing ritual as we have kind of reached the end of our main presentation today. So to kind of close us out, I have my friend Brene Brown, who I love and is one of my favorite authors and professionals within the counseling and social work world. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the power of our infinite light. Thank you guys so much for coming today.
Yes, yes, thank you. And I do have a few more things for you all, like I said, connecting to resources. So we do have some upcoming webinars that are just like this today, but instead of Good Grief, we are bringing in some outside experts. So I'm just going to put that here in the chat. So next month we have Dr. Kelly Moore. She works with Rutgers. She has her own private practice and wonderful blog, and she's going to meet with us in May. We have Mandy Zucker, who's going to be talking about young adult grief. We intentionally stuck that in June because I know many of us are working with young people who are now transitioning out of high school, whether that's into the working world, internships, college, whatever it is. How do we support those young adults as they transition away from schools and structures that they knew and were really used to? So I think that is going to be a really wonderful, wonderful session. I also have a survey for you all. We definitely want to know, what were your thoughts? Are there other topics that you'd be interested in seeing us address? Experts that you'd like us to get in contact with? Are you interested in learning more about the programming in our centers or Good Grief schools? And I'm going to directly link you to all of our resources as well. So good-grief.org/resources. There's our YouTube channel. I'm Evelyn with 2 N's. You'll see if you send it to Evelyn with 1 N, I don't know where it goes, maybe not to me. I'm Evelyn with 2 N's at good-grief.org. All things Good Grief schools or Good Grief at work. Alyssa would be happy to talk to you about programming here at Princeton, camp, and anything program related. But just want to pause there to see what questions you might have. We still have a few minutes. Feel free to hop into the chat if you want to pop something into the Q&A.
Ooh, good books about CBT or things by Ellis. And this is from our friend Thomas. Are there any good books about CBT or things by Ellis for work with our kids? That's a great question. As far as Ellis, I'm unsure about something specifically from him, and it's kind of funny thinking about him working with children because he has a reputation of being a very rugged kind of man.
You never know.
But what I can do, Thomas, if you want to send me an email or a chat, I'd be happy to kind of search for specific CBT materials and resources for elementary school aged kids. Typically, I would take advantage of what was available to me at therapy at either the practice that I'm working with or when I was in my graduate program, using that supervision time and discussions with my classmates to see what works for them. But for sure, feel free to reach out to me and we can connect offline.
Ooh, songs for challenging thoughts. I love a good musical interlude.
Feel free to put in the chat to kind of answer that question as well. I'd love to see, from our panelists if they kind of have a song that helps challenge our ants that may arrive.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, Alyssa, I saw the registration list. There are a lot of really great people in here from a wide variety of experience. There's just so much knowledge, ideas, everything in the room. So of course, feel free to utilize the chat. Yeah, oh, Canadian volunteers. Yeah, we could share the steps for dealing with ants again. Yeah, that's no problem. Also know that we are recording this, so this will be up on YouTube. So anyone who registered for this will be able to access that as well. But I'm happy to go back to the other slide. And then Alyssa, if there was anything else in the chat, I'm sure I just missed a few things. We're moving a little fast. Let's go back.
I'm seeing
Some songs.
research or suggestions for survivor skill. And I'm wondering, Evelyn, are there any existing links on our website that you know of that address specifically survivor skill?
I mean, almost all of our materials are focused on the people who are still here. So all of the grievers, but I don't know if we have anything specifically for survivors guilt, but I know there's a lot of stuff out there. So that's a really interesting question. We'll see what we could dig up.
Yeah.
And maybe it's something that we also should create.
Absolutely. And Delaney, again, feel free to kind of connect with us offline. Kind of talk more about finding more resources that exist out there.
Do you want to take us back through those steps, since there was a request to kind of run through them one more time, and then maybe we'll wrap for good?
Yeah, absolutely. So for step 1, recognize it, acknowledge what the ant is, describe it, and a suggestion is writing it down. So again, sometimes kids don't have that language to really verbalize what they're going through. So this can go through, be through a journal, could be through just kind of pinpointing where in the body that ant may present itself. Like remember the stomach ache, the heart palpitations, headache. And then also the song idea, what's a song that helps us challenge an ant, right? And I like that. That's really a neat perspective to kind of add to our toolbox. And the next step would be, again, capture and reframe and release. So challenging the thought, using those tools that we thought about, and putting it out into the ether. It's okay. I recognize that this is a thought that I'm having. I'm changing the way I may perceive it so I don't sit with that distress, and then release it back. It's okay. And kind of taking a step back to look at that bigger picture. The next is practicing self-care, which can present itself in many ways. Here at Good Grief, we have something baked into our program for volunteers, but also taking yourself, folks go home after a night at Good Grief. So what is available to you at your home in order to, be present for next time? And then the final thing is connecting with resources. And again, you've already earned a gold star for being here today. So finding out who are those resources, or what are those resources that you can use in order to help yourself be more successful in this work. And that's that. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, I'll just put everything into the chat one more time in case y'all missed it. But yeah, I just want to take this moment to just say thank you. So grateful for all of your time, your attention. I hope that you leave here with some tools, some resources, some things to think about, a heightened awareness, and always feel free to connect with us. We want to hear what you might need, what you might like to see in the future. But thank you so much for your time, to our friends, really from all over the world, from what I saw in the chat. Just deep appreciation for you all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Yes, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.